You can eat foods that improve your mental clarity, your focus, your attention, your memory, and your creativity. And what I want you to do is start thinking about how you can incorporate these foods into your day every single day. And you don't have to make big changes here, but small changes can lead to big results over time.
Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast, where it's all about taking control of your health, losing fat, transforming your body, and living the life you deserve with celebrity fitness trainer and longevity enthusiast, Ted Ryce. Do you ever feel like you're not performing your best mentally? And have you ever wondered, maybe there are foods that you could eat to boost your cognitive performance, things that you could eat that would help you focus better, learn things faster, and improve your memory? Well, I've got great news for you, because in today's episode, I'm going to reveal 8 foods backed by research that can improve your mental performance. And this is going to be very specific this episode. I'm going to tell you foods that have been backed in randomized controlled trials. We'll talk about what that means and why it's important. And also, I'm going to share with you the exact dosage that you need of these foods so that you can actually get the results. Because I have huge problems with episodes, blog posts, podcasts like this, and I want to deliver something different. So what is up, my friend? Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Ryce, health expert and coach to founders, entrepreneurs, and other high-performing professionals. I produce this show for 2 reasons. Number one is I've been in the health and fitness business for over 24 years now. And unfortunately, while that might sound like an impressive amount of time, the reality is I follow gurus who sounded very confident, but led me down some dead-end roads with their information. And I got so frustrated, I wanted to do something. I wanted to bring better information out there because we're swimming in a sea of misinformation. And I know how that sounds very self-serving, but I want to tell you, try what I share here. Don't believe me, but believe me enough to try what I share and see if you don't get better results than any of the other people that you're following. And the second reason is I'm a coach. And if you're a founder, entrepreneur, high-performing professional, and you know the value of coaching, you've experienced in your professional life, and you want to have as much success with your health as you've had with your career, your business, I want you to think about me. So let's jump into it. Today, we're going to go over these 8 science-backed foods to supercharge your brain power. And I want to tell you what I said at the beginning. Usually, articles, podcasts like this, they're worthless. They're just lists of vegetables and things you're probably already eating or not eating enough of, or they're not specific about what is actually causing the improvement here. And I get so frustrated when I read these because I want to know what does the research actually show? What about the amounts that we need to eat these foods in? And what is actually happening? What are the compounds in these foods that make the difference? And so I'm going to be explaining all those things. So we're going to be using randomized controlled trials in humans. Why randomized controlled trials? Because they're the gold standard of research. If someone doesn't have research in humans with randomized controlled trials, they're just kind of making stuff up. And that's part of the dead-end roads that I went down with some of the gurus. And other people, what they do is they talk about research done in animals. But what we know is that the same tests in animals often don't lead to the same results in human beings. And I want to say one more thing about randomized controlled trials, and then we're going to get rolling here. Randomized controlled trials, if you're not familiar with what that is, let's say if we wanted to test a supplement, what we would do is create a randomized controlled trial for, let's say, 12 weeks. And what we do is we'd have 2 groups. We'd have the experimental group and then the control group. So in the experimental group, we give them the supplement for 12 weeks to see if it makes a difference. And with the control group, we give them a placebo pill to see if to see if there's a difference between the supplement and placebo. because often the placebo effect is so strong that even they have to do this with medication. So drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, because the placebo effect is so strong. So what we want is we want to raise our confidence about what we're talking about. And randomized controlled trials do that. They offer us the highest amount of confidence that, hey, yes, there is actual evidence that this stuff works. So there's a little lesson for you. Now let's jump in. Number one is blueberries. And blueberries are rich in something called flavonoids. Specifically in blueberries, they have something called anthocyanins, which are powerful antioxidants known to provide various health benefits, including better cognition. And studies suggest that consuming blueberries can increase the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's the same stuff that gets released during aerobic exercise that plays a critical role in growth and survival of brain cells. So thereby influencing cognitive processes such as learning, memory, and mood regulation. And guess what? There are randomized controlled trials demonstrating that consuming blueberries leads to an effect. And guess what? It happens in as little as 2 hours following consumption. In fact, one study found that participants who drank a blueberry drink demonstrated significant improvement in memory and attention just by having this drink a couple hours before. And longer-term consumption of blueberries has also been shown to result in cognitive improvements. We have a 12-week research, a randomized controlled trial, showing that older adults who took a blueberry powder supplement showed significant improvements in cognitive function. Again, we're talking about executive function and memory. So how much should you take? What we want is a daily intake of 200 to 400 milligrams of those anthocyanins. And what does that turn out to be in terms of blueberries? Well, we're talking about 1 to 2 cups of fresh or frozen blueberries daily. And if you go for the wild blueberries, in general, those have higher levels of these anthocyanins. And if you want to go for a supplement, you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 grams of blueberry powder. So there you go, folks. If you're looking to do some cognitive work, if you're going to be using your brain, having some blueberries with your oatmeal or your Greek yogurt, or having the blueberry powder a couple hours before can boost your cognitive performance. Number 2 is fatty fish. So fatty fish such as salmon, mackerel, and sardines are high in omega-3 fatty acids. Now, as you may know, omega-3 fatty acids are essential fats that play a critical role in the structure and function of your brain. But more importantly, we have randomized controlled trials showing the effects of omega-3 supplementation and fish consumption on your brain function. So researchers have found that cognitive improvements could be observed just within a few weeks of consuming fatty fish or taking omega-3 supplements. So what are you looking to do here? You want to take 1 to 2 servings of fatty fish per week, or take a daily omega-3 supplement containing at least 200 to 500 milligrams of both EPA and DHA. So EPA and DHA are the 2 main types of omega-3 fatty acids. So it's also worth noting that some studies have used higher doses of omega-3 supplements with beneficial effects, but there does seem to be a problem with omega-3 supplements and atrial fibrillation. So until we know more, I wouldn't recommend having more than what I said, the 250 to 500 milligrams of both of combined EPA and DHA. So number 3 is walnuts. Walnuts are delicious and also include antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids. Again, we have randomized controlled trials investigating the effects of walnut consumption on your brain function. And researchers found that cognitive improvements could be observed within just a few months of consuming walnuts. For example, a 16-week randomized controlled trial involving older adults found that those who consumed a walnut-enriched diet had significant improvements in cognitive function. So we're talking about, again, memory and concentration compared to those people who followed just a normal diet. Other studies have shown that consuming walnuts may improve cognition in young adults as well, with one study reporting that consuming walnuts for 8 weeks led to significant improvements in memory and learning. So based on the available evidence right now, what we're looking to do is eat 1 to 2 ounces of walnuts per day. This amount is equivalent to about 7 to 14 if you don't want to weigh out your food. And, you can throw walnuts in oatmeal salads, yogurt, or just eat them as a snack. Just keep in mind the calories are important and walnuts are quite calorie dense. So you don't want to overdo it here thinking that having 500 calories, in other words, a bag of walnuts, is going to make you even smarter. So keep that in mind as well. Number 4 is dark chocolate. So similar to blueberries, dark chocolate is a rich source of flavonols. So these flavonols are plant compounds that have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. And again, they've been tested in randomized controlled trials showing a benefit. And in the case of chocolate, again, cognitive improvements could be observed within just a few hours of eating the dark chocolate. For example, a 2-week randomized controlled trial involving young adults found that those who consumed a high flavonol dark chocolate had significant improvements in cognitive function. So we're talking, again, memory and attention compared to those who consumed a low flavonol dark chocolate. Another study showed that consuming dark chocolate for 30 days led to improvements in cognitive function in healthy older adults. So based on the available evidence, how much should you eat? We're talking a daily intake of 30 to 60 grams of dark chocolate with a cocoa content of at least 70% for those cognitive benefits. That's around 1 to 2 small squares of dark chocolate per day. Again, keep in mind that dark chocolate has these cognitive benefits, but it's also high in calories. And if it's mixed with sugar, it's going to also have sugar. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that it has some caffeine and theobromine in it as well. So those are, caffeine, bromide or bromine. They're kind of messing that up there. I forget the name, sorry. But it has a stimulant, a caffeine-like stimulant, as well as having caffeine in it. So just understand there will be that effect as well. Number 5 is cocoa powder. I don't like dark chocolate. 70% and above, I have it sometimes, but I find it super bitter and it's high in fat. So that's where the calories come from. So I like cocoa powder instead. It's an excellent low-calorie alternative to dark chocolate and has the same amount of flavonols. And the way that I add cocoa powder is I add it into smoothies, Greek yogurt, oatmeal, baked goods, although that doesn't happen that much. But I find a way to add it in. Sometimes I add it into my coffee if I make coffee at home. And in randomized controlled trials, it showed similar effects as dark chocolate because it's basically the same thing. But what we're looking at is a low-calorie alternative. So how much should you have? Based on available evidence, a daily intake of somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 30 grams of cocoa powder per day is required to have these cognitive benefits. So what we're talking about is 1 to 2 tablespoons. And another thing is that it's important to note the flavonol content of cocoa powder can vary widely. So it's crucial to choose a high quality cocoa powder with a known flavonol content. So make sure you're buying something good out there. Don't go for the cheap stuff. And let's move to number 6. Number 6 is leafy greens. So leafy greens such as spinach, kale, and collard greens are rich in nutrients like vitamin K, minerals like magnesium, and antioxidants.
And again, they've been tested in randomized controlled trials, showing an improvement in cognitive function. For example, a 5-year randomized controlled trial involving older adults found that those who consumed leafy greens had a slower rate of cognitive decline as measured by tests of memory and attention compared to those who consumed fewer leafy greens. Other studies have shown specific leafy greens such as spinach, broccoli, kale may be particularly beneficial for cognitive function due to their high content of compounds such as lutein, folate, and sulforaphane. So based on available evidence, how much should you have? Well, we're talking a daily intake of about 1 to 2 servings. It's roughly 2 cups. It's not much. So if you hate leafy greens like some people do, what I recommend is you add them into something like an omelet. Another thing is I have clients put spinach in their protein shakes in the blender. It does turn your protein shake green, but it doesn't influence the taste at all. And I would also recommend shooting for higher amounts of leafy greens than just 2 cups. But if you're kind of struggling with veggies, at least have 2 cups of leafy greens per day. Again, it's so easy to add the leafy greens into something like a smoothie or an omelet. Number 7 is beets. Beets are a type of root vegetable that are rich in nitrates. And these nitrates, they're associated with various health benefits, including improved cognitive function. In randomized controlled trials, they found that the cognitive improvements could be observed within just a few hours of consuming beets. For example, a 4-week randomized controlled trial involving older adults found that those who consumed beet juice had significant improvements in cognitive function, again, as measured by tests of reaction time and cognitive flexibility compared to those who consumed a placebo drink. Another study found that consuming beet juice for 4 days led to improved cognitive function and increased blood flow to the brain in healthy young adults. So again, the active ingredient here are the naturally occurring nitrates, not the stuff found in your deli meats, which I believe are nitrites, but nitrates, naturally occurring nitrates. And these nitrates are converted in the body into something called nitric oxide. This helps increase blood flow to the brain and other areas, and it's worth having beets. Now, how much should you have? Based on the available evidence, consuming 1 to 2 cups of beets per day is recommended for cognitive benefits. So you can eat them raw, roasted, boiled, or grated in salads, but you got to hit around that 1 to 2 cups of beets per day. Another thing is it's important to note that the nitrate content of beets can vary wildly based on the growing conditions and preparation methods. So in other words, beets get their nitrate content from the soil. So if the soil is a bit lower in nitrates, you're going to have a different effect. You might have to increase that dosage. Another thing to consider here is beet powder. And this is something I'm going to start doing is after writing this article, after doing the deep dive into the randomized controlled trials and everything we're discussing here, I'm going to start having beetroot powder and traveling with it. Because in randomized controlled trials, researchers found that consuming beet powder can lead to a significant cognitive improvement as well, of course. So it's just as powerful as beets. For example, a 6-week randomized controlled trial involving older adults found that those who consume beet powder had significant improvements in memory and attention compared to the placebo. So how much beet powder, if we're going to go that route, how much should we take? We're talking about 5 to 10 grams of beet powder. So that's equivalent to about 1 to 2 teaspoons of beet powder per day. And again, just like eating whole beets, the nitrate content of beet powder can vary wildly. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is, if you are taking a blood pressure medication, you want to talk to your doctor or at least manage your blood pressure, keep track of it, because one of the benefits actually of beets is that your blood pressure can drop. And to make sure that it doesn't drop too much, you want to be on top of that. So talking to your healthcare professional and also monitoring your blood pressure on your own are two things that I would do if I were taking blood pressure medication for high blood pressure. Now, number 8 is coffee, which is a good thing because I have 1 to 2 coffees almost every morning and sometimes more, which I've been trying to avoid doing. Now, coffee is super popular and the caffeine in it is a strong drug, folks. It's a stimulant drug. Now, drugs aren't necessarily negative as long as they're not overdone. And with coffee, we know that it can lead to improved alertness, attention, and memory. Of course, I'm not telling you anything new, but it's good to know that there's been studies done on this. For example, a 12-week randomized controlled trial involving older adults found that those who consumed coffee had significant improvements in cognitive function. Again, we're talking memory and attention in this case, compared to those who consumed the placebo drink. Another study found that consuming coffee for 5 days led to significant improvements in cognitive function in healthy young adults. So the caffeine is what's responsible here. There are other things in coffee like chlorogenic acid and antioxidants, but the most powerful compound is certainly the caffeine. Now, caffeine works by blocking the action of a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And adenosine promotes sleep and suppresses what you would call arousal. So it suppresses, alertness. And by blocking adenosine, caffeine helps to increase brain activity and alertness, leading to an improved cognitive function. So based on the available evidence, what we're talking about is, again, 1 to 2 cups of coffee per day. This is about 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine per day. It's just worth noting that consuming too much caffeine can lead to negative side effects, including jitteriness, insomnia, anxiety. Not that you need me to tell you that if you're a coffee drinker like me, but it's really important because, as we know, I've talked about the Yerkes-Dodson law, where the right amount of stress or arousal is excellent for performance, but if you overdo it, you have a decrease in performance. So if you've ever drank too much coffee and tried to give a talk and it didn't go over well, or had too much coffee and went and did something that was kind of challenging and you got pretty frustrated or irritable, that was too much caffeine. So I say 1 to 2 cups, but you really have to make sure you pay attention to your own personal experience to dial it in right. So if you feel like 2 cups is too much, then back it off to 1. Additionally, you want to keep in mind, if you're going to add the cocoa powder with the coffee, that the cocoa powder, like I talked about earlier, or the dark chocolate also has caffeine in it. So take that into account as well. Although cocoa works through a different compound, it's the flavonols in the cocoa that work well versus the caffeine in coffee. So you can absolutely combine them together. You just have to make sure that you don't overdo it like I have. And that will lead to worse cognitive performance because you'll be too wired. So that wraps it up. What are we talking about again? Just to go over these 8 foods one more time, we're talking about blueberries and having somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 cups of fresh or frozen blueberries per day, or around 15 grams of a standardized blueberry extract supplement. Fatty fish, what are we talking about? We're talking about having 1 to 2 servings of fatty fish per week. We're taking a daily omega-3 supplement containing around 250 to 500 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA. Number 3 is walnuts. What are we talking about? Having about 1 to 2 ounces, or roughly 7 to 14 walnuts per day. Just make sure you don't overdo them, thinking that you're going to get even more smarter, more intelligent from eating a big bag of walnuts, because that will increase your waistline. So number 4 is dark chocolate, around 30 to 60 grams per day of at least 70%
cocoa content, or 1 to 2 small squares is what we're talking about. If you don't like dark chocolate, like I don't like dark chocolate, or at least want to spend my calorie budget on dark chocolate, cocoa powder is an excellent low calorie alternative. What we're talking about is having somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 30 grams of cocoa powder. That's around 1 to 2 tablespoons of powder per day. Number 6 is leafy greens. We're talking about having about 2 cups per day. Very easy to add into smoothies or salads or omelets. Number 7 is beets. So we're talking about 1 to 2 cups of beets per day, or 5 to 10 grams of beet powder. I didn't talk about the juice here because I think the sugar content is a bit high, but that's also an option. So having 8 ounces of beet juice. And coffee is number 8. So we're talking about 1 to 2 cups per day, but it's really important to not overstimulate yourself. And you'll know because you'll feel a little bit too much anxiety, or a little bit too aroused, a little bit too stressed. And if you notice that, you've overdone it. So really pay attention to how you feel, not just what the recommended daily intake is. So in conclusion here, you can eat foods that improve your mental clarity, your focus, your attention, your memory, and your creativity. And what I want you to do is start thinking about how you can incorporate these foods into your day every single day. And you don't have to make big changes here, but small changes can lead to big results over time. A lot of the studies talked about how the changes accumulated, or the food showed benefits after weeks or even months, while some, like the blueberries, the cocoa, and the coffee, led to benefits. Oh, also the beets led to benefits right away. So you'll get short-term benefits as well as long-term benefits. And just experimenting with some of these to see how they affect you can go a long way. That is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I have a lot more episodes like this coming. I want to deliver much better information about specifics, cut through some of the BS that's out there, and give you actionable information that will lead to a measurable improvement in your health and in your life. And if you found this episode helpful and you know another high performer that could benefit from some of the advice that we offered here today, I would love for you to think of someone who you know is really into this type of information, looking for an edge, and share this episode with them. It's the biggest compliment you can pay me is to share this episode, whether it's to a friend or on social media. So that is it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Look out for more content like this. Have big things in store for you this year. Have an amazing week, and I'll speak to you soon. And on Friday, we're going to talk about the neuroscience of motivation. And why are we going to talk about that? Because in the personal development world, when gurus talk about motivation, they share what works for them. But as Steven Kotler says in his excellent book, Art of Impossible, personality doesn't scale, but biology does. So when we're talking about the biology of motivation, we're really talking about our brain, how it works, because some strategies will work better than others. Because what most people do is they try to have enough discipline and willpower to follow a workout plan. But if it's not working, I want to suggest to you that there's more than just discipline and willpower at work here. So if you're the type of person who feels guilty for not eating healthy or skipping a workout, or maybe you blame yourself and say, you know what, I'm just not disciplined, even though you're a success in your professional life, there's more to it than that. So if you're curious and you want to stop feeling like you're failing because of using these strategies that work against your biology instead of with it, you're going to want to tune in on Friday to listen to the episode. We're going to explore some exciting ideas and practical tips that can help you overcome this idea of motivation, help you understand it, and help you create it when you need it. So that's all I've got. Tune in on Friday, and I'll speak to you then.
Thank you again for listening to the Legendary Life Podcast. We have some amazing episodes coming your way, so make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're already subscribed and today's episode hit home for you, please share this episode with someone who you know would benefit from listening. Take care and see you every Monday and Friday in your favorite podcast app.